Who will win the battle of the robots, US or China? A new era of global competition is unfolding, but it's not waged on the traditional battlefield, and it doesn't involve soldiers.
And it's happening right now. It's happening in our factories, in our warehouses, in our cities. This is the race for robotic supremacy and dominance. And the outcome will absolutely define the 21st century.
For years, the prevailing narrative has been America builds the world's most advanced, innovative robots. The US has been focused on pioneering the next generation of robotics.
And at the same time, China has pursued a different goal: mass adoption and industrial scale. The financial data reveals two very different strategies.
In the race to build the world's robotic workforce, it's clear the US and China are taking fundamentally different paths.
Who's going to win, Peter? Who's going to win?
That's what we're going to get into today. If you're new to the show, welcome. On this show, we move past the headlines and look at the why behind the world's most innovative technologies. Every week, we research and report on fierce competition between tech giants and startups fighting for dominance in the AI era. Our goal is to give you the operator's perspective, the inside perspective on who is winning, who is losing, how these tech wars are affecting your world. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn notifications so you will never miss a deep dive. But for today, we're breaking down US and China. Let's get into it. And the numbers don't lie in this one. Right into the hard data, because it really tells the whole story here.
It really does. We're seeing a lot of American companies generate hype, generate excitement with their early prototypes, right? But China is going straight to production, testing in prod, software developers would say, and integrating robots directly into its economy. There's already a huge manufacturing economy there in China, and they're just plugging these robots straight in and at an incredible pace. In 2024, China installed 250,000 new industrial robots. And that figure represents more than half of all new robots installed globally that year.
More than half. That is staggering. So where did the US stand in comparison there, Nick?
So currently, it's a huge contrast. In the same year, the US installed 34,000 new robots, again, compared to 295,000 in China. So huge difference, 34,000. Actually, that is a decrease from the previous year of 9%.
So it's not just the raw numbers, but the trajectory of it, everything.
Yeah, exactly. China's industrial robotics market was valued at $9.4 billion, if that makes sense, in 2024. And we all know it's going to grow. It's projected to be at over $16.5 billion in 2033. The US market shows a very different pattern with a notable reliance on imports, of course.
So this data doesn't suggest that one country is winning, but they are running two different races entirely. So what's driving these different strategies? Let's start with China. Their approach is built on two core pillars: massive government support and aggressive low-cost production.
That's right. The nation's Made in China 2025 initiative acts as a strategic framework for all of this. The government provides significant subsidies, offers deep discounts on new robot purchases, and funds R&D with huge tax breaks.
And the pros of that is pretty obvious. State-supported model allows Chinese companies to produce robots at price points that's very difficult for others to match.
But there is a con. This focus on volume may come at the expense of pioneering brand new, unproven technologies. They're looking at what they already have and just fixing current problems. So they may not be looking at where we may be in the future and what needs we may need there. But still, that cost advantage has fueled a very powerful export strategy.
We saw a perfect example of at the global tech shows like CES in 2026, where companies like Unitree Robotics made a major impression at a very low price point. Unitree Robotics, I think, was selling their robots for about $16,000, Nick.
Man, I remember seeing the Unitree Robotics. I was shocked first that you could order the thing, and then shocked at the price. Like, it looked like a scam. Unitree is just crushing it. They're using competitive pricing to just capture a huge international market. And their success, it highlights the core of the strategy, basically making robots accessible and scalable for the entire globe.
Meanwhile, in the United States, we've chosen a different path, prioritizing the creation of perfected AI-driven machines. You can think of this as Tesla's Optimus or the advanced humanoids from Figure AI, both of which we did previous podcasts on. Go check those out. These projects represent the cutting edge of robotic engineering.
Pro of this approach is that it bets on creating a revolutionary leap forward, developing highly advanced intelligent systems that could define entire industries.
But what's the con to that?
I mean, is that, we're seeing a lot of prototypes, a lot of things that look great in the lab or look great on their video, but we're not yet seeing tons and tons of robots from US companies in factory floors. Yeah, we see Figure. It's cool to see them in BMW factories, but I've been seeing a lot of cool rendered or in a lab robotics videos from US companies. I'd like to start seeing them shipping like China is doing. So while the US designs for the future, its industries have become a lot more reliant on today's global supply chain. Most industrial robots in the US are imported from Japan and Europe, and China is increasingly dominating the supply of key components for these robots.
And that creates a strategic trade-off. What are the risks when your chief competitor is also your primary supplier?
Now, the competition is moving to its next critical phase. Humanoid robots, right? This is what gets a lot of the hype. Of course, there are many robotics, industrial robots that are being used that are not humanoid, large robotic arms. Beijing has declared its ambition to lead in the field of humanoid robots.
We saw that at the recent CES in 2026 technology conference, where Chinese companies reportedly accounted for more than half of all the exhibitors showcasing humanoid robots.
And it signals a convergence of two strategies. China is now applying its scale and speed model to the next frontier of technology.
The two philosophies are clear. While America dreams of creating a few super intelligent all-purpose robots, China simultaneously is working to deploy millions of specialized robots that are affordable, effective, and available now. Okay, Nick, that was the breakdown. Let's add some commentary. Where do you think China's advantages are, and where are we going to go in the future? We've kind of broken down some of the advantages. China is mass producing them at affordable costs. US is trying to get these finally innovative products. What are your thoughts on the future of this competition here?
Yeah, so we're seeing some of the U.S. companies that are building these beautiful, pristine, can do everything humanoid robots. China's just going straight to production and putting these out there. And I think some of that really is coming from the models between China and the U.S. The government is directly subsidizing these companies to push these initiatives. Meanwhile, in the U.S., this is all backed by venture capital, right? And so you do need to put together these beautiful, pristine robots that allow people to dream about what they will be able to do in the future and then go and raise the venture capital. I think that's why we're seeing so many of these rendered videos of beautiful robots that we all want to happen, but who's going to win? Because everyone's putting out their new idea for this future with humanoid robots, whether in the home or whether in factories, right? I think that's really the reason that we're seeing this discrepancy between US and China. The strategy that usually wins when you're building a new company or a new industry is shipping. So China has a big advantage because while you could say, well, they're not focusing as much on humanoid robots and they're shipping. That usually wins. It wins today and it wins in the future, right? And we're starting to see that. And another thing, Peter, that I think is worth noting here is that the tech we're seeing come out now, namely AI, LLMs, ChatGPT, that does thinking work, and humanoid robots that can replace and supplement current human labor is very, very different from past tech races that we've seen, like the smartphone, ride sharing, even the PC. I mean, what else is there that were these big competitive new product categories that we've seen?
I'm curious. I have a question for you, Nick, because you have experience doing a hardware startup, and I believe you also had some manufacturers in China and you've experienced dealing with Chinese manufacturers. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, with your experience, how was it dealing with a US-based manufacturing company versus a Chinese-based manufacturing company for a hardware startup? What were some of the differences, advantages that were noticeable for you as a entrepreneur?
8 times the cost in the US.
Oh boy.
That was like the rule of thumb. And I would see it in practice. Anything you want to do, it is 8 times more expensive in the US versus China. Granted, so that we're talking about Tile, the item locator company that I co-founded. And I mean, manufacturing in the US, it sounds great for many, many, many reasons, but there's just like nothing you could do. China is, for decades, it was known as, well, it's cheap labor. That's why you build over there. They are exceptional at building manufacturing products, especially consumer electronics.
Yeah.
And you would not only pay a premium in the US to manufacture it, but there just are not as many people that are exceptional at manufacturing here, right?
What about the speed? How is their timeliness to deliver? I know the cost is a lot less, but are US firms also slower to deliver on manufacturing? I mean, you got to ship it from China.
That I can't comment on too well, partially because I don't know what it's like lately, and also because there are just so many details, and there are huge drawbacks to manufacturing in China as a US company. The obvious things, having to travel there over and over, all the costs associated with it. Language barrier, cultural barrier. Actually, the cultural barrier is, I think, worse than the language barrier. You can translate word for word, but to understand exactly what someone means, it's a little bit different. And when you need to focus on details in order to get your product properly manufactured, some of those really important details are just lost, right? So there are a lot of hidden costs there. But I mean, when it came down to it, at least for Tile, the expertise and ability to scale just did not exist in the US. It just didn't. We didn't do a thorough search, but it very quickly led us to the obvious by far answer is to manufacture with a global company that manufactures in China. They're just so freaking good at it.
We will not be able to compete with producing robots at the same cost as China. We just cannot. We just can't. It's a race that China is much better prepared for than us. We won't be able to produce robots that are humanoid robots cheaper than China. I don't see
Everyone
that being
in China
strategy.
has like a brother-in-law that's an expert in injection molding. That's how deep manufacturing is into the culture there, right? I don't know anyone that injection molds. Do you?
No.
Let alone as an expert in it, right? And I actually think that's lost often on a lot of people in tech here, whether they're investors or founders. What do you do with that then if you do want to build a product? I mean, it all comes down to what exactly you're doing and who you are and how you want to do it. But it's just a huge advantage. It's just true that China has this manufacturing advantage. What Elon did with Tesla in the US was incredible. He had so many headwinds, right? You would not have as many headwinds as Elon did in China. Everyone's just like, oh, okay, that's how you build a factory at scale. More people that know that over there. He had to really, really push to make the Model 3 factory really work and work at scale.
Yeah, there's just different challenges that U.S. companies face when manufacturing. There's more regulations, right? There's labor costs are different. There's more safety guidelines, perhaps. And China has a state-driven strategy. They've got this 5-year plan sponsored by the government where they're seeing humanoid robots as important to the country, a strategic government investment, kind of a national infrastructure, if you will. And where US, it really is driven by the innovation markets, right? By the venture capital and the elite research lab, whether it be Boston Dynamics or Figure AI. The innovation is much more focused on the breakthrough capabilities. So the robots are going to be at a higher price point, and they're going to be maybe doing more advanced things. And it's going to be perhaps a comparison of a high margin kind of precision that the US companies will have versus a low cost, like an iPhone, perhaps, versus is it Xiaomi is the Chinese comparison there. Now, the other comparison of these two, and what we do well in the US, we don't manufacture hardware as well, but we do a really good job of manufacturing software. And I worked in software for 14 years, and our software development and software innovation is world-class, in my opinion. Would you agree?
It really is, and that's not changing anytime soon in the US. Exceptional, right? Others
That's
are
right.
catching up. China is also pretty great and very motivated. But yeah, the US is very, very good at software, and it's
So
hard.
yeah, while China has the hardware advantage, I would say US has the software advantage. We have the foundation models for a lot of these robots.
Yeah.
With XAI, it's a US company. OpenAI, all US companies.
Yeah.
So we have the foundation model, and the robots do need that physical AI, that embodied AI to understand the world. So we have that advantage to it. So is it going to be a quantity or quality?
And you
That's going
could
to be the
say that's the
question.
most important thing, right? Hardware is a commodity, manufacturing hardware is a commodity. That may or may not be true with this next era. Another interesting point too, Peter, is kind of the meta over all of this, right? That we're manufacturing laborers. We're manufacturing humanoid robots that may work in factories, right? These robots may be building themselves. That sounds super sci-fi, right? But yeah, maybe, right?
If that's the case, then maybe we could get our production costs a little down, but in China would do the same, and they were going to be able to
Right.
beat us at
That's
that.
true.
Now,
That's
there
true.
is an equalizing policy arrangement with the tariffs. It gets a little complex, though, because I believe for some of the US-based companies, they do use rare earths that do come from China or other places that can be affected. Like their supply chain does
Yep.
get affected by tariffs depending on the thing. But in general, the Chinese companies are going to be exposed to more risk of tariffs, which
Yeah.
does affect the cost, and we even it out,
Well,
whether
for the
that's
US market,
for the US
right?
market. Yeah, maybe not for the rest of the world, but
Right.
yes.
Maybe that's what some of this comes down to is like there's a US market and then there's the rest of the world, right? We will see.
Just like the auto industry, which we talked about, in
Right.
our last episode, the US is not just going to the government's just not going to let China dominate the humanoid race. They're going to put policies in place that makes it perhaps fair or maybe so restrictive that China can't even sell into the US like they can't right now with their cars and their EVs. So for the US, it's hard that China will dominate in the humanoid race for the US market just because we're clearly going to give preference to our own robots made from American companies, just as China will give preference to their Chinese robots and humanoids to work in the Chinese market. So it is a question of globally now. It's pretty
Yeah.
clear, like who's going to win China, who's going to win the US. Those markets are pretty well decided. Who's going to win globally? Is it going to be a price or is it going to be quality? From a sales background, because I was
Yeah.
the sales rep, price is pretty important.
Yeah.
Price is pretty important. Companies can review a product and make a huge requirements list and everything like that and get everything checked off. And then at the last minute, they'll go, we ain't got the budget. We're going with the other guy.
Thanks for your hard work.
Yeah. And the business case for humanoids specifically is human labor, which is very expensive in Europe. The labor markets in Europe are very expensive, which is getting more of the up for grab markets, perhaps. And Mexico and South America have cheaper labor. It's just, I think the leading indicator here to observe, Nick, is who is winning the EV war, because that will likely dictate who will win the humanoid war as well.
Potentially, right? I mean, what the Chinese companies have done to catch up to Tesla is miraculous, is shocking how they're able to build these gigantic factories and like not even like this is kind of did it overnight. I mean, over a few years, right? But that's basically overnight in manufacturing terms. It's unreal.
They're the supplier, the manufacturer, and the shipper. They have their own cargo ships for EVs.
Yeah, that's just the funniest little detail they have. They build their own cargo ships to ship them.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So, I would say globally right now, the EV market is probably tipping in favor of BYD and Chinese manufacturers. The humanoid market will probably reveal some of the same. But the use cases for humanoids, man, it could go so many ways. It could go so many ways where Chinese robots are better for simple, repetitive tasks, perhaps in a controlled environment, maybe manufacturing. But if we have advanced humanoids that can act and replace advanced skills, I don't know, police officer, something comes up top of my head, firefighter, something like maybe that's not as controlled environment that a Chinese robot couldn't do, then we could have success in those markets that are up for grabs, right?
Yeah.
The labor market is so big that there is going to be a lot more startups. There's going to be a lot of people entering this. The humanoids, it's just early. They're not quite there yet. When they will get there is the other question of who will win and then win. By 2030, a lot could change.
And we're also kind of grouping them all together, right? Into one category where it looks like a human. There will be very different use cases. There will be very different markets for humanoid robots. I mean, one reason though that AI and humanoid robots are so interesting and weird and makes you fearful is this is kind of an attack on how humans define themselves, like our purpose for being and our ways of being useful in the world. It's like it's kind of deeply disturbing at people's core and makes people question why they even exist. A lot of people don't want this to happen. But, on the other hand, any new technology does this to some degree, almost by definition. And you could say the more that a technology displaces people's purpose, the more important it actually is. I mean, these could be the most important technologies we've ever created.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's weird, it's uncomfortable, but we've seen this story before, just maybe in smaller ways. And if you believe that, so Peter, if you believe that technology in general improves humanity, then one could argue that we should actually welcome those that shake up our sense of purpose. However, no individual would ever want to sacrifice their current purpose and livelihood for the sake of an arguably better humanity in the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking this through, the other risk of the US versus China humanoid race is that, let's say these humanoids start to get a little bit more advanced and they start to replace people's jobs in the US. That's not going to go over well with a big portion of the general public. I mean, think of how unions will react to humanoids taking over their jobs. I mean, just remember the battle between the taxi cabs and Uber?
Totally. It got violent.
It got violent. So it's not like we can just come in and the humanoids are advanced enough that, hey, we can replace all US labor. There's going to be a cultural fight back. The cultural fight will then drive perhaps different political arguments, which could perhaps put regulations, which would then slow down our innovation and damper our ability to compete globally versus China. So it's another risk there. It's kind of tricky. I think you and I, who are both technologists, are pretty believing in, using the most advanced technology, and that's the way to advance civilization. And ultimately, it's a collaboration between humans and humanoids, and we work for tech companies, and that's how the future will probably lay out. And sure, some jobs might be lost, a truck driver in manufacturing, but new jobs will be created, and overall, people's quality of life will improve from technology. Does it really improve from policy? Not usually. It's not.
Yeah.
That's
No,
not the effective
it
way
doesn't.
to improve civilization. Either way, either direction of policy is there's always unintended consequences when we
Yep.
try to regulate and do policy. And this is coming. This is our future. And we got to be the leader in it, is my opinion.
I think there will be a boom in labor, meaning we need more humans to work. There'll be many, many jobs. I think we'll go through a not so great period for the next few years as things shift. So, okay, let me take you through kind of the logic on why that will happen. Why I think that will happen, right? Is that one interesting piece of why AI and robotics is so important is that they are potentially replacing or supplementing human labor. The economy of any country, any company has always historically been based on the number of workers that you have. And now we are manufacturing workers, which is very scary, right? But if we can manufacture them, that could mean we are going to see an economic boom over the next 5, 10, 20 years like we have never seen before, because workers were always the bottleneck. Now we're uncapping that bottleneck.
Okay.
Right?
So you're right. There's a scenario where we just get more productive and more efficient and we don't reduce our workforce.
Well, yes. Although I think in the short term, there'll be some pain, right? But so if that was a bottleneck, human workers and all the training and everything, right? And now we remove that bottleneck and the economy starts booming, what are the next bottlenecks that we're going to start hitting, right? We're already talking about energy bottlenecks, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that the bottleneck will come back around to humans, right? Like there'll be some things that only humans can do. And we may see an enormous need for humans to come back into the labor force after this displacement in order to keep this economy booming.
Yeah. So another thing to think about with this race for the humanoid. So I related the humanoid race between the US and China, I previously related to the EV race, but there is a difference between the two. And the difference between the two is that cars are sold to consumers and robots are sold to consumers and to enterprises. And when it relates to the enterprise market, China does have different challenges, particularly around privacy. For consumer products, privacy is generally not the biggest objection. People can get around to it. They'd rather pay half the price and sacrifice some privacy. However, if China is trying to sell 10,000 robots to a manufacturing company, privacy is going to be taken very seriously. And they're going to have to go through extensive privacy and security compliances, which they might not be able to do. There might be large companies in Europe or so on that will not be on board with the potential privacy risks and security risks that come with using Chinese humanoid robots. So from the enterprise case, we do have an advantage in the US that perhaps there is, and that still would be a concern with the US. Anytime we talk about privacy for enterprises, anytime where it's an international company and you have contracts and everything like that, it does add more risk. But from a privacy standpoint, I would see a European company being perhaps more trustworthy to a US company who's got a lot more transparency with the privacy practices.
I could see that. And the narrative is growing on needing privacy, not just among companies, but privacy from other countries.
Yeah. I mean, think of the enterprise software space. To my knowledge, there's not large Chinese enterprise software spaces that are used by a lot of European or certainly not the American companies, probably for that reason. I haven't researched this part in particular. Perhaps over the world, China does export software pretty well. But to my knowledge, they're not a huge player in that game outside of China because when enterprises use technology, there is perhaps the risk of sensitive data being leaked or that data having a backend exposure, and there's all types of regulation policies that they have to adhere to. Is going to be a factor with the humanoid race.
There are cultural differences on privacy as well.
Yeah, it is interesting. So we'll see. I mean, I remarked earlier that price is a big deal for a company. A company will make a list of requirements. A company will hit all that, but if it's too expensive, they'll use a competitor that has half the features but half the cost. When it comes to privacy, though, it's not something you can negotiate.
Interesting. It's not a checkbox on a feature list.
No. They might look at a variety of vendors, they shortlist you, then they go through a due diligence where it's InfoSec due diligence and they review over privacy and you can pull in people. And there's a lot of deals that I've been on in this enterprise software space where we just couldn't get over that hurdle.
I imagine that happens late in the process as well.
Usually because you don't do a deep dive when they've got 5 vendors. It's initially, to a short list, and the short list you do a deep dive. And then that's when you kind of put the privacy teams together to evaluate policies, to do red lines and legal, and sometimes you just can't get over that hurdle. And that's going to be a challenge for the humanoid robots for the enterprise space. So, this fight's up for grabs. I think the EV fight, the US is trailing, but the humanoid fight, our robots, they look pretty nice. Figure,
damn sexy.
Tesla, I know they're going to cost, 30, 40,000. The Chinese robots will cost maybe 15, 10, 20,000. But the US robots, they're pretty cool.
And that's all that matters is look.
This look at the robot race reveals 2 distinct philosophies.
And China's strategy is immense scale, supported by government investment and a focus on cost-effective manufacturing. And it's powerful. We all know that. It prioritizes present-day industrial needs and market share, and they are crushing it.
The United States is making a different bet. That groundbreaking innovation and superior AI will ultimately create a more significant and long-term advantage.
And Peter, you said it perfectly earlier. A single perfect robot in a lab somewhere, it's a feat of engineering, but actually shipping an army of thousands, hundreds of thousands of factory floor workers is a more important feat.
The question is, which approach will prove more decisive in the end?
And the race is far from over. The coming years will be very pivotal. We'll all be watching.
So who do you think has the winning strategy? The innovator focused on the big next leap or the manufacturer focused on dominating the present? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think US is winning? Do you think China is winning?
And of course, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on the future of technology, be sure to subscribe. We'll be putting these out every week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.